I think out here we're a sort of degree away from journalists being gunned down in their homes at the moment. But we are, there was a really worrying development, I think, around 2 years ago that didn't make the news at all out here, was that a local, I think a local cop had been corrupted into one of the gangs. And that is something that had never been heard of. Corruption's pretty low. It has to be said. Like, it's a pretty uncorrupt country. Just, like people in real estate doing the usual thing. But that is like a big red flag. If you're starting to catch cops in the game, you can bet that there are baggage handlers and other kind of authorities that are in on it. So, I mean, I keep saying this, but it's happening, it's already happening here, and people just aren't kind of waking up to how big an issue it is. And also, fentanyl is now being found in cocaine.
I'm Katarina Schultz. I'm a relentless investigative journalist who spent the last few years embedded in the heart of chaos of the world's most dangerous drug war.
Here's a dead body.
You might have heard my reporting on borderland narcosis. Now, I'm taking you to the front lines. I've built trust on both sides, with traffickers, law enforcement, and the very people trapped in between. I'm taking you into the heart of Mexico's cartel war with fast, raw updates from the heart of the borderlands. Subscribe now to Borderland Dispatches with me, Katarina Schultz. And don't miss my regular appearances on Borderland Narcosis with Vince Rocco Vargas on YouTube at This Is Ironclad or wherever you get your podcasts.
It seems like countries kind of go through a phase, almost like crawl, walk, run, if you will. And if they started with you were saying cocaine and methamphetamines, I think the next step, the graduation to fentanyl is usually next. Is fentanyl been a prevalent drug out there, or is it starting to now become something?
I mean, the short answer is no, not really yet, but it has been found sort of what they called nicotines, like similar kind of drug, have been found in cocaine. And there have been a couple of worrying cases, actually not far from here, in towns, sort of farming towns, in the hills and mountains nearby to Wellington in New Zealand. So people have taken party drugs and they've been laced with fentanyl. There have been a bunch of deaths of people taking synthetic opioids. So it's like, it is happening, and it's never happened before. So I guess you could say, again, like, this is a big warning sign. I don't think there is the history that there is in the US of synthetic drugs kind of graduating onto the black market. I don't think there is that there. Similar to in Europe, right? I mean, parts of Northern Europe, like Scotland especially, have chronic heroin issues, but they don't have any fentanyl issues. Part of that's to do with like the history of drug taking in these countries. But it is, I mean, it's getting into the supply, right? Because the narcos are using it. They're produced. I mean, they're not Pfizer, So it's getting into the supply of other stuff, and yeah, it is making its way into some of the shipments of cocaine and other stuff here, but that's a very small part of the equation. I think the big part is still meth and increasingly cocaine.
You mentioned twice that and I'm sure there's plenty more, that these drugs are floating up. What is happening? Is it because of the ocean or whatever? Or is this a kind of storm that's capsizing these boats? Do they have an answer for that?
Yeah, in some cases it is. Yeah, I mean, I think in some cases it's just been like they've just missed their transshipment point. The track has gone wrong. They've used the wrong guy. He's an idiot. Like it's kind of clown show stuff. Sometimes they've just been intercepted. I mean, there's one case that's crazy, I think was in the article, that's about them using a sub in the Pacific, which, I mean, I think trans-Pacific submarines, I don't think the Americans have even got like more than half a dozen of them. So this is pretty worrying.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
they're getting
subs are
more and
not
more
used
sophisticated.
often.
But
So
yeah,
that's
no,
when you start
not
seeing
at
that
all.
kind of when you start seeing that kind of stuff, you're like, whoa, this is a different level.
Yeah, this is not like, your narco subs that you get rocking up in mangroves off the coast of Costa Rica. This is traveling in open seas. Like, this is nuts. So that's something to be concerned about. And I'm not sure that these little toy boats that the New Zealanders have just, smashed the champagne bottles on are going to be much use against them. But yeah, I mean, you do get bigger bust, but bigger bust just means, that more's getting through. And I think that when I spoke to the head of customs here, he was very open and saying, like, we only have, I mean, best practice for checking shipping containers around the world is in Northern Europe, in Rotterdam. And I think it's like 8% you can check. They don't do that. They say they do that. They might do it on a Monday. But here, it's like 1 to 2% max that you're checking at the big ports in New Zealand. And out in the Pacific Islands, there is no checking. There's zero. And there's less than zero if you pay everyone. So that's your reason. This stuff is getting through because no one's checking it. And there's such vast shipping routes. What are you going to do? Like finding, the Americans have a lot of military naval missions that are going out looking for Chinese spying vessels in the Pacific. They can't find them because everyone forgets how gigantic the Pacific is. It's like finding a needle in like 50 haystacks. And if they can't do it for national security reasons in the US, like you're not going to get New Zealand tracking down a Sinaloa Cartel sub in the middle of the Pacific Islands outside of like the Federated States of Micronesia. Like it's not happening. So you gotta stop the demand, and you gotta get it tracked to the border, and that ain't happening either.
Yeah, it's crazy. It sounds like the cartels are now kind of considering to be global franchises, and you find them all over the
Oh
world
yeah,
now, and now, a place like New Zealand
yeah.
is fascinating. It almost raises the question: what's the biggest threat to America? This criminal syndicate that's a global franchise that could make more money and cause more havoc across the world than just like we don't have to worry about in LA anymore. We have to worry about all over the world.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think it was what the philosopher Moises Naim that said that the first beneficiaries of globalization were cartels. And you see that now, right?